Peter came and said to Jesus, "Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times?" Jesus said to him, "Not 7 times, but I tell you 77 times. For this reason, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves." This is Judgment Day. Well, imagine that. "So when he began the reckoning, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. And as he could not pay, his Lord ordered him to be sold together with his wife and children and all his possessions, and payment to be made. So the slave fell on his knees before him, saying, 'Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything.' And out of pity for him, the Lord of that slave released him and forgave him the debt. But that same slave, as he went out, came upon one of his fellow slaves who owed him only 100 denarii. And seizing him by the throat, he said, 'Pay what you owe.' Then his fellow slave fell down and pleaded with him, 'Have patience with me, and I will pay you.' But he refused. Then he went and threw him into prison until he would pay the debt. When his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their Lord all that had taken place. Then his Lord summoned him and said to him, 'You wicked slave,' he said, 'I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not have had mercy on your fellow slave as I had mercy on you?' And in anger, his Lord handed him over to be tortured until he would pay his entire debt. So my heavenly Father," Jesus added, "will also do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother or sister from your heart." The Gospel of the Lord. You may be seated. Father John, thank you for being here. It's good to talk with you about this most difficult topic.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. Yeah, let's see. Okay. Matt, is this working?
I got it. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, let me thank you for the amazing work you have done in this community. I know you were so busy at St. Francis, but all of us felt your leadership, your courage, your amazing kindness, your grace. I know our members here at Grace have been deeply, deeply moved by your leadership. You know, we've exchanged a pulpit once, but every month there is a Taizé service that we do together, Vacation Bible School we do together. There's the backdoor theater so children and youth of our congregations get to know one another and realize that they belong to the same family of God. The pantry that you have, our members enjoy supporting that, and on and on and on. It's just a privilege to be working together, and to culminate this long tenure that you've had is to lead a book study that you and I had a chance to lead about a year or two ago, focusing on the Holy Land and what's going on there. But your openness to do that and taking the time to do that is just remarkable. I know how busy you are. And you did it because you believe in the oneness of the family of Jesus. And we may have differences, but you have not let that stand in the way. So thank you.
Yeah.
Let's give them a hand.
Most welcome. Thank you. Thank you. It's been an honor. It's always good to be around God's people wherever they're located, here down the street or anywhere else. And I also believe the openness that you speak about, and I believe that you've been taking a long look at through these lessons that you've been doing and will be doing. For myself, I know that what has really humbled me is getting in touch with the forgiveness of God in a very personal, profoundly personal way. I know that we're all called to be reconciled to the Lord and to try our best to be reconciled with one another. But I also, at least in my own life, and perhaps yourselves too sometimes in your lives, find it difficult to forgive yourself. Find it hard to say that, how can I be forgiven for something that I did or said or didn't do? And that has certainly come to me, wrestled with my own human limitations, but it has been the experience, the humbling realization, and somewhere finding the good sense to open myself up to that unconditional love of God that has really made a profound difference in my life and knocked me down a few notches and humbled me a little bit. So,
yeah.
Thanks.
You know, it's amazing how Jesus uses this example, this parable about a king, a lord, that his servants come to do the accounting, and one owes him 10,000 talents. I looked it up, and 10,000 was the highest number you can count in the ancient Greek system. So this is the highest number, and then talent was the highest amount of money you could talk about. You know, it was actually what you weigh in terms of silver. It was like 130 pounds or something like that. But so Jesus is using an exaggerated language to say that this man owed him so much money, it would take him 150,000 years to pay back. He had no chance at all to be able to pay back his master. He got himself in so much trouble, and Jesus says he does have a chance, not because he could do anything about it, but because God is so merciful.
Yeah.
You know, the Pope had the year of mercy, I think it was last year.
Correct.
And I cheat, and I see what the Pope is doing over and over again.
God bless you. I try to do that too.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to focus on God's mercy, which is just unbelievable. That God could forgive what is unforgivable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what the Pope said shortly when he's standing in the window after he was elected was, pray for me. I am a sinner. For the Pope or the King to do that kind of forgiveness, the Pope to be open to that. It was a profound influence on my own life, and I believe many other people too. Just interesting to me, it's been interesting to me that in our own tradition, the Catholic tradition and the renewal that came from Second Vatican Council, the renewal of the sacraments of baptism and Eucharist and ordination and marriage, the last and the most difficult was reconciliation and penance. And lots of reasons for that, you know, who's forgiven and who isn't, how deep that touches us within ourselves. And it just took time and a lot of prayer and effort to work at that and to change the sacrament itself so that it could be a full court press, that it could be a full-hearted experience of God's unconditional love. And you and I have talked before, I think of all the things in our world and in our own lives that we look to change. We need to stop this. We need to start something else. I think it starts and ends with forgiveness. Our ability to forgive, a real challenge sometimes. Our ability to ask for forgiveness, sometimes that also is very hard. Like the servants in first reading, for them to be able to ask for forgiveness for the unforgivable, and to be open to receiving that.
Yeah. You know, Luther struggled with his sin so much, and especially he struggled with wanting to meet God's righteousness, the expectation that I need to meet what God expects from me. And the revelation, when he became free, so to speak, was when he realized you can't earn God's righteousness. God's righteousness is a gift. And that really was a turning point for him, because he beat himself up. He did everything possible to punish himself, which didn't do any good. It didn't help him to feel better. It's interesting with the story of Joseph that you heard earlier. I wonder what you think about that. So his brothers were wondering many, many years later whether Joseph was holding grudges against them, because, as you know, they threw him in a well, and then they, sold him into slavery in Egypt, and then finally now they're facing him, and they're wondering, their dad just died, Jacob just died, is Joseph going to take vengeance on us? So who do you think about that you're worried whether they will punish you? Is it God? Is it other people? Or is it you wanting to take vengeance on someone else? Is that pound of flesh, right, that we want to take on someone else? So how do you do that as a priest in terms of helping a Catholic person? Half of our members are Catholics or ex-Catholics. So I am not going to ask you to raise your hands, but how do you help a Catholic person with forgiveness and reconciliation?
Interesting that you ask. I was with somebody recently who is close to death, and they themselves are wrestling with their own lack of generosity in their life, and how many other opportunities they could have had to be gracious and generous to other people, and they really felt bad about that. And then, how can God forgive me because I've been so blessed and I've had so much, and I didn't do as much as I could have. And the only thing I could think of is, especially this man who was an attorney, he knew the punishment reward thing, consequences and judgments and all those sorts of things. But the only thing I could think of is, I understand how you feel, and I can have a sense of where you're at. But there's something more, is there not? Isn't there that is all of your lack of generosity or greed or whatever you want to call it, is all of the greed of the whole world, all of the sin of all of history, is all of that powerful enough to negate the love of God? Is not the love of God greater than all of us put together? And it's not so much my telling him something that he didn't know. I think it was something that he deeply believed and just needed to have somebody affirm or to give credence to, just by himself not saying it, but somebody else saying it. And I also believe that that's ultimately where we wind up, is trying to humbly open ourselves to the love of God, and then let that sink into ourselves and try to share that with other people. And I think, as you said, it's difficult. The kitchen table, the living room, work, the world that we live in. There are lots of struggles, but I keep coming back to knowing and experiencing God's love in my own life, and how can I not try my best to be that way with other people?
What a beautiful way of putting it. Wouldn't it be fun to do this every week?
I'll be back next week.
All right. So, we're talking about starting over, right? So last week we talked about, if someone sins against you, Jesus said, go and talk to that person directly. Don't talk to everybody else first, right? So that's one thing. Start over by talking to that person directly. Then if that doesn't work, you get help. Today, we have this amazing message about God's love and forgiveness that we can never pay back. It's just a gift from God to us. And God says, no matter what, go and do likewise. First of all, receive that forgiveness, as Father John was just saying. It all starts there. Believe my word to you. Today, when you hear Jesus in the sacrament of Holy Communion saying, my body given for you, my blood shed for you for the forgiveness of sin, Jesus is there to come inside of us to assure us one more time that God in Jesus forgives all our sins and can help us start over So today, I challenge you to think about, how do I start over? I once heard, I'll close with that, and then think about a closing statement for yourself. I remember attending a conference where a psychiatrist was speaking about forgiveness, a Christian psychiatrist. And I asked, you know, based on my experience as a pastor, people have a hard time with forgiveness. And I said, how long should a person be able to go on without forgiving? I mean, how many years does it take sometimes? Sometimes it takes a whole lifetime. And he said, well, I don't know an answer to that. You know, for some people, depending on how badly they were hurt, it could take 10 years, 20 years, or a lifetime, but it's a waste of time. So today, God is inviting us to think about where we're at and what are those walls that stand in the way, and how do we let them crumble through God's grace?
From a very human point of view, beginning with ourselves and our own relationships with one another, when we have had the strength to ask for forgiveness, or when we have had the strength, the humility to offer forgiveness to each other, I believe that if you thought about it right now, you would remember what a tremendous relief and how that has changed your relationship. It hasn't so much erased things, but it helps you to be in a deeper, more committed relationship with a person that you're really close to. And is it not the same with God? When we're able to let ourselves believe in God's forgiveness, that puts us on a different level, a different relationship with God. If we get our sin and our forgiveness out of the way, we can experience God's love much more deeply.
It's freedom and, yeah, liberation. Thank you so much. I have a little gift for you. It's very light. I know what pastors are like. They carry heavy crosses. This is a light cross. So, I mean, I found it at New Mulray Abbey, where I had a sabbatical this summer. And they make these crosses at this monastery. It was in my room, and I said, oh, I'd love to have a cross like that. And then I went to their shop, and sure enough, they had it there. And then there's a thank you note. Just what a joy it was for me to receive your grace and your love. See? This cross is made up of 4 nails. The nails you'd imagine were in Jesus on his cross. But it's also empty, and there's gold in there, what looks like gold, reminding us of the resurrection. That no matter what we go through in life, there's the promise that God has overcome sin, death, and the devil, and we can celebrate. Look forward to having you again, and I'm just grateful. Let's give him a hand, please. Thank you.